for coming. I'm Givhan, and I'm the fashion critic for the Washington Post. And it is a pleasure to welcome you to this installment of A New Line. And I'm really thrilled to be with Prabal Gurung, who is, applaud.
Thank you. You're forced to.
This is his 10th anniversary in business, which in fashion years, that's like 50 years in business. And it also, to mark the occasion, he also has a wonderful book about his career. And he is also the honorary designer for this year's gala at the American Portrait Institute. And we'll get him to tell us what all that means and all that business. But before we get started, I just want to let you know and let our audience that's watching from afar that you can tweet questions for Prabal to answer using the hashtag #PostLive, and I will get to those at the end of our conversation. But I thought I would start at the beginning, which is a little bit about your very interesting background, which is that you were born in Singapore and you grew up in Nepal and you worked in New Delhi.
And
then you came to New York.
Yeah.
And once you got to New York, you also interned for Donna Karan and worked at Bill Blass.
Yes.
And then you launched your own line. That's a lot of assorted inspiration. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a sense of what pieces of that background have most, I think, influenced the way that you think about fashion?
I think for me, all of it plays an equal, and every season it's different, but every place that I've been to, and I consider, though I'm Nepali, I consider my heritage, from Nepal, but I lived in India for a longest period of time as well, and Singapore, London, and Australia before I came here. And, it really taught me to look at the world slightly different. But how I always say is, if you really haven't been to Nepal or India, you don't look at colors. There's a certain part of your mind that hasn't worked. I always say that, because
I just went to India on vacation, so I can totally attest to the onslaught of color.
It's intense, whether it's the color, it's the texture, it's the smell, it's the sound, it's the celebration, it's the joy, And I think, so that really had a major influence on me. But my work, all of this, and my career, what I've done in 10 years is an amalgamation of that, all of those coming together and forming my own voice, pretty much.
Well, one of the things that you have said is that you only ever really wanted to make clothes to make women look beautiful, that you don't chase this idea of cool.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
After working at Bill Blass, where I would say that was the first, the American couture house, I would say, the way that the seamstresses were from, let's say, Ungaro, Chanel, and Valentino, and the tailors were from Ferragamo and Armani. My real training happened there. And what I realized was, the kind of clothes that I wanted to make needed a little more studying, a little more, I would say, time, needed a little more, it was a lot more nuance in making of the clothes. I also decided to make majority of the clothes in New York. And so at that place, though when I launched, the industry was about contemporary fashion, cool designers, like big parties, all that stuff.
And it was in the midst of a recession as well.
Which was, yes. And a lot of people had told me not to do it, but I decided to do it, and I was like, if it doesn't work out, I'll blame it on recession, So for me, I wanted to make beautiful clothes. What I realized early on was, I was brought up by a single mother who worked. And she would come home after work and she'd have events to go to. And I'd watch her, she'd come back from work, she'll change into her saris and everything, and she'll put it right in front of the mirror, and she'll stop doing her makeup, put on her jewelry, and put on a red lipstick and walk away. And I was just fascinated by the woman who walked in and the woman who walked out. Though she was my mother, how it could change. And the confidence that she felt, when she walked out. And I realized I wanted to capture that essence when I created something that is about celebration of beauty rather than cool, because, cool fades, beauty remains, So that's what I feel. It's timeless.
As a designer and as a business person, how do you then sort of negotiate when the industry almost as a whole sort of shifts towards one idea?
Yeah.
When the industry suddenly says, athleisure is everything.
Yeah.
And you're over here making beautiful clothes. How do you balance those two things?
Here's the thing. It's how do you balance? There are two ways, several ways to balance it. One
without going out of business.
Yeah, exactly, without going out of business. One is you continue to do what you do because there's always an audience for you. I always believe there might be, like for instance, for you, there might be a moment in your day that you might want to wear, let's say, athleisure stuff, and versus there might be a time during your day that you might need to wear a beautiful dress, And I realize that I don't need to cater to every need of hers. I want to cater to a specific need for her. And so that was one aspect of it. The second aspect was, while the industry was in this athleisure trend, and I said, you do a collaboration. That's what I did. Yeah.
But it also seems like in some ways you are not a full believer in the idea of lifestyle fashion, in the sense that, so many designers use lifestyle as a way of essentially saying, I want to design everything for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like you want to design for a specific part of someone's life.
Yeah, here's the thing. I'm more about a mindset than a lifestyle, And what I mean by that is I celebrate the essence of a woman, I celebrate the essence of a man. I'm not necessarily trying to please everyone and be everything to everyone, That means you really can't do justice. I think it's virtually impossible to. And so for me, what I wanted to do, I'd read somewhere if you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one, and including yourself, right? So I knew what I was good at, and I knew what my story was going to be. When I started my career, almost 10 years, or more than 10 years ago, there were two kinds of women in fashion. That was a woman who, if she was serious, she didn't care. If she was intellectual, she didn't care about fashion. Mm-hmm. If you cared about fashion, you were frivolous. That was the idea, right? However, for me, just being surrounded by women, including my mother, all these women that have, been in my life, they all have their jobs. They are very driven. They're ambitious. They're successful, and they also care about style. And I found it really kind of amazing that there was these two set of ideas. So when I launched in fall 2009, what I said was, Minal Mystery was the one who asked me, who's this girl? And I said, I hadn't thought about it. I was like, it's a thinking man's sex symbol. And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, it's this idea that, those two women and those two ideas is not mutually exclusive. It can come together and that's what it is. At the end of the day, my job as a designer is to make beautiful clothes, try to make as beautiful as I can, and make a woman feel beautiful in that particular moment. Because what I have to keep in mind, I always imagine this, in our day-to-day lives, I feel more than men, women multitask 100 times more, right? And I always feel like that, let's say 1 hour of getting dressed, it's a particular quiet moment with herself. There's a dress hanging there, hopefully mine, in the bathroom, and she's getting ready. I imagine this, she's getting ready, and she's putting on music, she's putting on her makeup, does that, and that.
That's such a much more sedate morning than I usually have.
Well, I didn't say the time of the day, She could be going out on a date or not, date with herself, and I felt like that particular moment. I always cherish in some subconscious way being part of that moment with her.
And at that point, when you were launching the collection, was the word feminist in your mind? Yeah. Because it has become really almost the essence of your brand.
Yeah, it has always been. I was brought up by a single mother who was divorced in Nepal, and at that time in Nepal, like being divorced was unheard of. It was not accepted. So just imagine the trouble and the struggle that she went through. I grew up with a mother who always said to us, one thing was we're three of us, 3 children she has. She said, I want to make sure that my children are not burdened to this planet, and I want to make sure that they are. And she always said, try to do the right thing and don't be afraid to speak up against injustice. And she was, before I even understood what feminism or feminist was, she was the first person I saw, right? And from day one, I have been talking about femininity with a bite, like the celebration of, I always felt a woman in her full feminine glory, and I witnessed it, is so unnerving to patriarchy. I've seen that happen, and it really unnerves. And so I've always looked at that as like the biggest strength, one of the biggest strengths for women, just to embrace it, and before it was even popular, I remember like early on when I talked about whether it's a singing man's sex symbol or a celebration of women in position of power, a lot of people in fashion and outside we used to be, oh, you're a fashion designer. Make clothes, and
Can I quote you back to you? You said a while ago when I interviewed you that, quote, fashion is not the land of the stupids. Although, I don't know, sometimes it could be the bubble of the uninformed.
or if you look at the politics right now, we can apply to
Let's
that too.
Let's just go there, yeah.
We can apply that to what's happening right now as well. So, I think fashion is, I would say, it's a highlight of the world. Like what happens, what you see, and we know oftentimes the fashion industry really gets bad rep for, because what the world sees is the 10% of glamour and the fabulousness. But the real work happens in 90% of the time, behind the scenes. It's an industry driven by minorities, LGBTQ members, people of color, women, immigrants, a lot of them undocumented, and it's an industry driven by that. And so I find the complexities involving that, I find it really fascinating. Yes, it is true what you sometimes read about fashion and the fabulousness and, a lot of the stupids, yes.
How do you wrestle with that, with all of what that entails, though? Because you're absolutely right about fashion is in fact an industry populated by immigrants and people of color and women, and often they're at they get the short end of the stick.
Of course.
And fashion presents the image of glamour.
Lately inclusive and diverse.
Yeah. Right. But when you step out on that limb and start speaking up, what do you then become sort of the agitator in the industry? How do your peers respond?
Now it's a different story, as we all know. When I started speaking up, it wasn't because let me put it this way. So my company is, self-financed, independently owned. So I own the company. I have another partner there. So it allows us the freedom to do the right thing. Okay. Oftentimes, when you have investors, partners, you're answerable to all of them. So how I react is my job as I came to America to become a designer because I had this passion for it, and after paying my dues and everything, I've reached wherever I have. Along the way, I've gained some kind of notoriety and audience, some kind of following. What I always felt was, all that attention, all that stuff that's coming my way, it just can't be for myself. I have to use this platform for something that's better other than myself, and other than my selfies, though I do love those, just so that you know. You know that, so
you can follow him on Instagram.
Yeah, well, you make sure it's. No, I'm just kidding. And you know, I wanted to, I don't know, I just completely lost the chain of thought, sorry. This is what happens. Every time we are sitting down and having this conversation, I'm trying to have a serious conversation here, but every time we sit down, we're just like laughing about it. Sorry
Well,
about that.
I will again quote you back to yourself, because I thought this was a really, I thought this was quite interesting. And you were talking about diversity, and that diversity on the runway, inclusiveness in your business is in many ways connected to the people that you hang out with. Mm-hmm. And you had said you have to ask yourself, is it all similar looking people? Change doesn't come from staying in your safe space. I always say I cannot be the only person of color at your dinner party. Mm-hmm. How challenging is it to
say that?
Well, to say it, yes, and to
it is.
To deal with the reaction that I know you've gotten from.
Yeah, horrible. I mean, like, and you know it. You know, it's. I always knew this. I was very clear about my intention, my integrity, and my what I wanted to say. It was not for me. It was for a bigger cause, bigger good, bigger movement. I always believed that it was not about me. So when I decided to speak up, when I decided to call out, or just have it, my goal was to let's have a conversation, let's have a dialogue. We are constantly talking about wanting to make a change in fashion. We wanted to make a change in the industry and the world. We talk about diversity and inclusion, and then all of a sudden your decision-making table looks just the same. The status quo remains the same. And whereas these bigger companies, you know, what they do is the front office is all colorful, you know, the wait staff, the front desk and all that stuff, so it looks colorful and diverse. The decision-making table is the same. And I always say, till it is more than 50% minorities and people of color and women, the change is not going to happen. That is the reality. So I decided to, I keep on having this conversation at the risk of being unpopular, because I really didn't care. I really didn't. I'm very, how do you say, without sounding arrogant, I would say if tomorrow you pointed, said, okay, no, probably these are your flaws, this is what's wrong with you, I probably agree with you, because I probably would know that, So I'm very sure about myself in terms of the path that I've taken. And so you are going to be unpopular. People are going to be, but I don't worry about that, because I'm not here, And it's also like, when I speak up, and if there are people who don't like what I'm saying, it's probably they're never going to be in your universe. They're not ever going to see you, And people who really see me and people who really care about all these human issues completely embrace me and have we can have that conversation. So that's how I look at it. It's sometimes it's that's life. It's good and bad. It all comes together.
Is it scary sometimes as a business person? I mean, to say things that are provocative in the context
I'm just trying to figure out, what have
industry.
I said that's so provocative?
Well, and then to have people say, well, wait, you're not perfect.
Yeah.
Or, what about your house? Is your house perfect?
Yeah.
We live in an era of social media and cancel culture and no room for mistakes.
Yeah.
So how do you brace yourself for that?
So how I look at it is this. I always believe, I've never been afraid of confrontation, because confrontation results to discussions result to resolution. Okay, that's what I've always believed. If somebody feels like what I'm doing is not right, and I'm more than happy to have that conversation. I'm unafraid to have that. There's a thing, the truth about the cancel culture, how it can be toxic, but at the end of the day, I always feel like the world is having a reckoning and awakening, finally, right? Because of social media, yes, there's a lot of backlash in there, but also the good things are happening, okay? So how I look at a lot of these stuff, and even if I'm called out or someone else, it's a question about accountability. There are a lot of angry people, and their anger is not unfounded. There's a reason why. They've been behind the scenes. Their voices have not been heard. This is the first time. With as we know in life, not everything is 100% great or 100% bad. There's a gray areas. I just like, in so many ways, I do love the world that we're living right now, where we are able to have this conversation, difficult conversation, especially in our industry in fashion, where, I remember, like, as I said, like, I would talk about it, and, people would ask me to shut up, but now I'm so glad, including, there's things like this. I mean, my whole activism thing, I think, came in the forefront, while I was doing it back home in Nepal almost 8 years ago when I started my foundation back home in Nepal. I started simply because there was this Fashion Week daily, the daily news, the magazine had come out. It was my collection and it was my picture and it said, "A Star is Born." While it was great for my, brand and everything, I called my brother and my sister, and my brother lives in Mumbai, my sister is in Nepal, and I said, "Listen, all this good stuff is happening and I'm going to start to believe this hype. I'm going to think that I'm like the it one, So so I was just like, so why don't we start our foundation back home in Nepal that we always wanted to do it. So we started with 12 girls, and then now we've gone to 300 children. And these are inmates' children, street workers' children, orphans there. And then recently we started the education.
You support them in education?
In education, full education, till they graduate and get a job. And we started this education initiative for female prisoners back home in Nepal, and because we believe in second chances. And we started building shelters, building clinics. In 8 years, we've been able to impact more than 50,000 lives, right? So this is something that I'd always done. I never talked about it too much. And then came a collection that I did that my own personal hero, Gloria Steinem,
who came to her first fashion show, which was yours.
Yes, I was. It's still. Thank you. No, thank you very much. I mean, that moment. That's the thing. Those are those few moments.
That was better than Kim Kardashian.
I love Kim. Let's not talk.
I'm just asking. Was it better than Kim Kardashian?
I love Kim because when her the contour makeup came thing, so she sent it to me. So I was just literally, I was doing my contour and everything, and I was just and I texted and I said, "Oh my God, this is really good. It is really good." Just so that you know. So anyway, going back to Gloria Steinem. So again, that's what I'm saying. We need Gloria Steinem. We also need and contouring. It's very important. We all know that. I had zero idea about it. All of a sudden, my mom's
all of us in our full glory.
Yeah, and all of a sudden my mom is like, "Why do you look different in pictures than in real life?" And my mom is the one who always calls me out, and I was like, "No, Mom, I think you need glasses." That's what it's always like. But going back to that Gloria Steinem thing, and it was the collection that I was inspired by, and I did that collection, and it was very subtle and nuanced and everything. And the same year was when Maria Grazia and Dior did We Should All Be Feminist. And then it was really talked about. So what hit me really at that time was I've been doing this, and very quietly and subtly, and and sometimes what I realized, that was the time when I realized, and sometimes in fashion, during fashion show, things need to be spelled out. Nuances are not always caught in a runway or when people are taking videos, you know what I mean? So that was that, and right after that was the election, when our Hillary Clinton won the presidential race, but the system happened the other way around, and we all felt the collective loss. We felt a collective loss because, for me personally, besides who she was, what she represented. For the first time there was going to be a woman president, and especially for me, in a personal way, it really resonated, the possibility of her becoming that, because when my sister got married, and in that house, at that time they were very orthodox in a way, and patriarchy ruled, right? And now things have changed. At the time, there were arguments and all that, discussions, and an elder person said, "Look at a country like America. They don't have a female president. What are you talking about women's rights?" And that was something that really had deep inside of me. So when the possibility of her was happening, was a big moment for all of us, and not just personally that way, but for the industry. When it didn't happen, I realized there was such a sense of collective loss there, and I wanted to talk about that, not just politics, but about human issues. Because what was being discussed at that time in politics was something that I was completely shocked, like, whether against LGBTQs, women's rights, all of that stuff, And so I did that T-shirt collection, and I made sure that there was one, I made sure that I gave credit to Maria Grazia for the idea, all of that stuff. And that's when people were like, oh, you're an activist. And I said, I said, oh, at that time, everyone in the company was like, are you sure you want to be this political and everything? And I thought about it, and I was like, these are not political issues, these are human issues.
Did you get backlash from retailers? Because I don't think that people realize how much of a leap it is for designers to take a political position, because other designers have reported or have talked about, going out and speaking their mind and literally having retailers cancel collections.
Fortunately for me, the retailers, I think everyone felt that. All of them, almost all of them were like very supportive of it. There were, the disappointment was between the two stores who wanted to do the window display, and that was the who wanted the exclusive. And so I hate that game, and so that was the.
So your timing was good.
It's.
People were ready for it.
People, they were, and I didn't. And I said at that time, I was like, I literally didn't even think anybody would want these T-shirts. I just wanted to make a statement because, as you know, behind every collection there's a storyline,
Right.
And I wanted to be able to tell this story. But the minute that happened, everybody wanted it.
There have been a lot of feminist T-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do beyond the T-shirt?
Mm-hmm.
Because I have been, I've written about how at a certain point the T-shirt is nice, but selling, a $200 T-shirt, how does that move anything forward?
Here's the thing. This is, think about pre-T-shirts, right? Mm-hmm. What fashion was, where we really didn't talk about politics and all this stuff. At least based on the reviews that you guys write, right? I would read everything. Probably, subtle nuanced one was probably Miuccia Prada. Had a little bit of conversation about that, all that stuff. But fashion really never delved in that. And so now, post that, I look at it, yes, T-shirts, it was a conversation starter, like I've moved on from it, and a lot of designers have moved on, but it set the stage for new designers and all of us to start really thinking about, all right, how are we doing this besides T-shirts? For instance, that's where my foundation became even more, when we decided to do this education initiative for female prisoners, it was after that,
In some ways, could you argue that then, this administration, and you were one of, designers who talked about whether or not they would or wouldn't address the current First Lady. You addressed Mrs. Obama. Has it been good in the sense that it has brought this conversation out into public spaces?
The thinnest silver lining, right? Let's be real. The thinnest, the tiny, like the sliver of silver lining is that. I can't. The damage that has been done is, monumental. I'm like so gigantic that. I can't even be like, oh yeah, it's been great. But yeah, the reality is people feel it. People are less afraid to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And
has it made you a better designer in some regards?
Yes. What really, I'll tell you this, it was almost 3 or 4 years into my career, I sat down with Diane von Furstenberg. She had come to Nepal, and we'd hung out. She met my mom and everyone, and I did dinner for her. And then she came back and she invited me.
She's kind of spectacular. Right?
She's phenomenal. She invited me to her place, and we had lunch. And she said, don't be afraid to embrace your heritage. Go full on. go full on board, and who you are, and she knew the story, like, you know, my mom's and all that stuff, and then she was like, this is who you are, just go for it. And because before that, I was like in very subtle nuances only, and that's when I fully embraced it, you know. And so that was one starting point for me. The other, after all this stuff that's happening in politics and culture, it made me really aware of, like, you know, about representation, visibility. There was a time, I still remember when in the beginning, it used to be when we used to cast models, it used to be, all right, you have 2 Asian girls, you have 1 black models, you're good. That was the conversation. And I was new in the game, you know, and I wasn't like you know, this crazy, like, you know, like this confident at that time. And I was just like, okay, like, and I decided to follow the rules of like what that had been written. And after a while, I was just like, no. So I decided to really take matters in my hand, and I said, this is how I wanted to. My dinner table, my personal dinner table looks colorful. People of different ages, sizes, race, everyone, and gender, and why can't my runway look like that? And that's when I decided. I sat down, I changed, you know, my casting directors, and I had this conversation. This is what I want the world to look like. This is what I want it to be, you know? And we changed it, and it affected it. So yeah, I mean, you know, fashion has a long way to go. I mean, even like my plus size thing that I did, you know, like one of the things I still remember, I was in a diversity panel, and everyone was talking about, you know, diversity on a runway, models and everything. And there was this curvy woman who's raised her hand and said, you guys are talking about race, what about plus size? And the leader of our diversity panel said, oh, we'll get to you. It really bothered me. I was just like deep down, I just looked at it, I was like, I see you, but I don't have anything that I've done to tell you, yeah, I see you. You know, when I launched my first collection, you know, we offered it to size 22 and up. Okay, no retailers were buying it. My first, you know, I had several private clients from Bill Blass of like certain sizes. I never saw that. My first, you know, commission of a celebrity was Oprah Winfrey. You know, and I loved, and I came to America because of her, to be completely honest, you know.
Yeah.
No, I'm not kidding, and I know it sounds.
You said that you
know,
watched,
it is so true.
You watched
because
the
then
show
I traveled, I've traveled everywhere and everything, and I remember going back home to Nepal, and I turned on the television, and we were not encouraged to watch television. You know, we were, okay, you need to read, so we read a lot. One day I turned on the television.
Oprah's Book Club?
It wasn't there then. It wasn't then, yeah. This is in Nepal. And I turned on, it was Phil Donahue, and I had zero idea who he was at that time. And then right after that was Oprah. And I remember watching her show about living your dreams and taking risks and all that stuff. And I turned to my sister, and I was like, you know, I want to give it a shot in America. I've traveled everywhere. I've never been there. And I want to come here. And I applied to Parsons, and I got through, you know. So I was going somewhere. Sorry, like it's taking.
Well, you were going to the Tale of Oprah.
So did I tell you
the first commission?
Yeah. So my commission. Yeah. So in terms of like, you know, so I always saw. I keep on saying.
And what was Oprah like?
Oh, she was amazing. So she, you know, I think I can say this. Yeah. So she flew me to Chicago, and we fitted that, and you know, I was like trying to be very cool. Yeah, I zipped her in. Okay, this is great. You know, just very calm. And then she said, "How did we find you?" And I started telling the story, and I was just like, literally, I'm not going to cry, I feel like. You know, I started crying, and she started crying, and I was just like, you know, it was the most, you know, for me early on, Robin, you have to understand, like when I decided to launch my business in fall 2009, it was deep in recession. I had a great job at Bill Blass. I had savings. I took a leap of faith. Everyone had said, don't do it. I felt in my heart that it was the right time, you know, and that I had something to say. So I went on, I had a savings. I moved from big apartment to small apartment in East Village, right in front of Hell's Angels. And I went on unemployment, you know, and that's the great thing about American government, you know. I went on unemployment, and I went on a lot of dates, just
to get dinner.
I mean, yes. I'm trying to be like, you know, I was very, no, it is true. Like, so I went on a lot of, so I might have gathered and acquired a little bit of bad karma there, you know, because So I had to. It was like, listen, it was like literally, I didn't want to call up my family and be like, oh, can you send me money? They've always spent so much money on education and all that stuff. I was like, I'm going to do this, you know? And so that's how I started my thing, right? So going back to, this started with the plus size thing. Like, you know, this is, yeah. So I'm just like,
I like the way it's going.
And it's going everywhere. So imagine having dinner with me or drinks with me. It is, you won't be able to catch up. Like, I'll be like talking about this here. Normally, my chain of thought is like very much like that. But today's not a normal day. And so
back to Oprah and plus size.
You're the one who's like causing me. No. Sorry. Okay, so no. But the reason I'm telling you this story is even with the plus size, right? It was a conversation that people were not willing to have. I still remember. And after that panel happened, I came back and I was on my way home on West 4th and right in front of 6th Avenue. And it was the day of Victoria's Secret show. And all those models are my friends. So we were texting, Joan, everyone was like, congratulations, amazing, that. And I sat down and I was thinking, you know, my God, like we still, like I love these girls and I know how hard they work, but what about the other kind of beauty? Because I deeply know what it feels like to be not seen, not to see anyone who looks like you and being celebrated, you know, or desired. Right at that time, Lane Bryant came with like the I'm No Angel bus. You know, and that hit me, and I called up my office and I said, I want to set up a meeting with Lane Bryant. I want to do a collaboration. We had a meeting, and they were like really excited about it, and I gave them saying, I want to do the shoot with the best photographer, best model, and I want it to be in pages of Vogue, because this girl deserves. And so we shot with Inez and Vinod, Ashley Graham, and we got pages of Vogue.
And then someone half-jokingly said to you,
I was at
you're designing for fat people now.
Yeah, no, she said, why? No, she said, in front of everyone, she said, why are you designing for fat girls, fat people? Like, why are you? Because, you know, at the time, still, like, you know, it's so...
How long ago was that?
This was, I would say, probably like 5 years ago, 5, 6 years. And she said that in front of everyone. And I said, it's because of people like you that I want to do it. That's what I said. You know, and obviously, and then she saw my face. She was like, "Oh, I was just joking," and I just said this. So I said, you know, there's nothing funny about that.
And do you think that's changed?
It still hasn't. You know, like my thing with here's the thing: in any industry that has been led by patriarchy, I don't want it to be like I want to be very like PC about this. The conversation about diversity, visibility, inclusion, size, everything is still a topical conversation. It's still, there's a long way to go, especially our industry. You know, we keep on making mistakes because the decision-making table looks the same. And I feel, yes, the conversation is being had. Yes, you know, there are, and I'm happy about that. But the progress is at snail's pace. It's so slow.
Well, you touched quite a nerve at a dinner party when someone had said to me that one of the things that you essentially put out there on the table was that so much of the conversation about diversity and inclusiveness and just sort of breadth of customer within the fashion industry is defined by gay white designers.
Did I say that?
You said that. And practically the entire table recoiled.
Okay. So, okay. Basically, this is a hot seat. I thought it was like, no. I mean, it is true. Like, you know, here's the thing. It is also, I don't know how to, unless you're a minority, and I'm not just talking about race, I'm talking as women, as including here, you know, you'll understand what it feels like to be slighted, what it feels like to be not seen, not heard. Okay, in fashion, for the longest period, if you think about what we think is chic, okay, when you look at a collection, oh, the color is chic, oh, the pattern is chic, the shape is chic, it's very much dictated by the white world. Let me just put it that way. You know, it is very much dictated by the century-old tastemakers that has history in, it's very Eurocentric. Even the features, like even within the Asian community, like, you know, when we look at like models and, oh, like, you know, anything that is like we say, like half Asian, half white, you know, or like we call it hapas, you know, and anything that is closer to the spectrum of whiteness is considered beautiful. It comes to style also. Like I remember I was in a panel, like judging like new designers and everything, and I remember this beautiful African print, not African American, African print, colorful and everything. And it really resonated with me because there was a story there, right there. I didn't know who the designers were. But the other panels were immediately like, oh, it's so tacky. And I looked at them and I said, you haven't seen colors. You really don't understand. So what I'm trying, it's not so much about blaming someone or like, what I'm trying to start a conversation is like, travel, see the different cultures, different world. The head wrap, what you thought was like, oh, it's crazy, is actually quite beautiful. There's a symbol behind it. The sari that women in Nepal wrap around and a shawl that they wrap around their waist is not, it's not adding bulk. There's a purpose behind it. There's a grace behind it. There's a history and there's a story behind it. So my conversation is not so much about calling people out. It's literally about starting a dialogue, starting a conversation, because I've traveled a lot and I see all of us function with the one simple notion that we want to be seen, we want to be validated, that we want to feel that we matter. That's all it is, whether you're in fashion, whether you're in politics, whatever you do. And that is the guiding factor for me. That is the guiding light for me about what I do, because at the end, I always say, the absolute truth about our life is the impermanence of it. We all have to go one day. That's no denying that. What we leave behind, big or small, is what we need to think about. And for me, I always said this, even if I can make a smallest dent in the industry that I'm in, and make people look at fashion differently and look at fashion not just as a place of like beautiful clothes and everything, but there's a substance behind it. I would consider that a job well done. That was always my driving factor. So yeah, got really serious. Yeah.
Well, as I had said earlier, that 10 years is practically 50 years in fashion terms.
Though.
You don't look a day over one.
Oh, thank you.
But so much has changed since you started.
Yes.
Particularly in the realm of where people go to purchase clothes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rest in peace, Barney's.
Yeah. Heartbreaking.
You have colleagues who have been in business longer who are contracting and closing down. I mean, what do you look to in the next 10 years as the biggest hurdles, the biggest challenges?
I think definitely scaling for any small business, especially a business like mine, which is, as I said, independently owned, self-financed,
Did Barney's closing, is that like a significant blow to you, or just one that you'll endure?
One that I will endure, for sure. When you're a creative person and also happen to be an entrepreneur and like in the business side of it, you start making decisions that, as a creative person, you want to spend gazillion dollars in a collection, right? The business side of it has to be, no, you can't, So you play with that. It takes up, a lot of my time doing that, but it has helped me get to where I am today. It is what's happening. It's the reality, in terms of like whether it's Barney's or other designers closing their houses and everything. But it's always related to, I feel like more often than not, when there's a wrong partnership, wrong investors. And I think, so that's where I feel like we all have to look at what does success mean to us. For someone, it is $4 billion. For someone, it could be 4 million. Someone, it could be 40. So you have to define your own idea of success. So that's when and it goes back to one of your first questions, I didn't care about being the it designer because I wanted to do it in my own pace. I wanted to do everything in my own pace, which means, so my business is, primarily driven by wholesale. There's a little bit of e-com and a lot of private clients, So I've been able to grow that very gradually and slowly, and it has been really, actually, quite fruitful for me, I want to trust me, and you know this, ambition is there, desire is there to reach large numbers of people, simply because how I look at fashion, what I do is with my clothes, with my runway, with all these beautiful clothes, I entice people. And my goal is to come into my world, you're welcome, come into my world. And then I want to have conversation about that. People, fun, happy, frivolous conversation, but also conversation about, really substantive conversation that matters, the culture. So that's my goal, right? So if I can reach in a larger audience, that will be amazing.
Well, perfect segue. Okay, I'm going to ask an audience question because we're running out of time and I don't want anyone to revolt. So the first one here actually is an interesting one. Which fashion designer, living or deceased, has been your biggest inspiration?
Yves Saint Laurent. Yves Saint Laurent. Not
Saint Laurent.
Well, not Saint Laurent. Saint Laurent. I mean, I like Saint Laurent for what they say. I mean, it's fun because they're all friends with colleagues. But Yves Saint Laurent for me has so many memories. The first lipstick that I saw of my mom's was that. The perfume, and then when I started looking at his collection, what he did such beautiful, glamorous clothes, but at the same time, it was also practical. And he really understood women, and I truly believe he saw women, regardless of, in different kind of women, and he considered them all beautiful, And that's what I thought was really powerful about him. I think he was probably one of the first designers at that time to use a lot of black models.
Yeah.
And not because of just that. There's so many things about Yves Saint Laurent it resonates with me. So I love him.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to say thank you very much
You're welcome.
for doing this. It's been an absolute pleasure. As I mentioned earlier, you will be the honorary designer at the Portrait Gala, so congratulations
Thank you very
on that
much.
again. And an entire video of this will be on, hang on, WashingtonPost.com/postlive. And please join us in the reception area for a book signing.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.